to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book, The Portal, no other than Mr. Tom Cronin.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me along.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Tom, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Well, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a coach and meditation teacher and retreat host. And before that, I was a broker in finance, living a very much a different lifestyle on a trading room floor, trading swaps and bonds on international markets. And that led me to picking up meditation, and this is where I am today.
Mr. Tom Cronin, thank you so much for sharing your book to the world, The Portal. So, how can meditation contribute the world peace?
Well, if we think about what conflict is and the absence of peace, it's really a result of individual states of mind. And every war was started with an idea. And if we want to change conflict, if we want to change war, then we must bring about peace internally to individuals. And I feel that one of the most efficient and effective ways for us to experience inner peace is through meditation. And when we experience inner peace, what we find is a distinct correlation between those people that find inner peace and them living and expressing and manifesting quite peaceful lives around them. So if we multiply that, if we just take a Tibetan monk or a Thai Buddhist monk, we look at the very gentle, peaceful nature of those people. And then if we were to see our global leaders and individuals realizing this inner nature of their own being, then by results, direct results of that, I think we'll have more peace on the planet.
So, Mr. Tom, in what ways does meditation help reduce stress and anxiety on a global scale?
Well, global is really just a result of one individual and their state of mind multiplied by billions. And that's really, if we think things very simply, when we introduce meditation and get someone into a state of peace, and then we multiply that by many, many people over into the millions, and ideally, if I've got anything to do with it, billions, then what's going to happen is a ripple effect over time where the multitude of people all experiencing inner peace will result in a global result of outer peace as well.
So, Mr. Tom, can meditation play a role in resolving conflicts between nations? If so, wow, or
Hmm.
how, I should say.
Yeah, it's a big question, isn't it? And I look, I believe so. And I think already we can see that we're seeing more and more countries living peacefully next door to each other. We're seeing this exponentially growing. We still have pockets of conflict, obviously. We've got Russia and Ukraine, we've got what's happening in Palestine and Israel, we've got what's happening in Africa in a couple of places. We've got some conflict happening within countries based upon religions or tribal differences or political differences. And we're also seeing pockets of that disruption and conflict happening around the world between other countries. However, I believe, and what I'm seeing is that we're evolving as a species to become more kind, more caring, more compassionate, more understanding, and more integrated, accepting of more people's cultures, accepting of more people's religions, accepting of different people's genders. And so this is a gradual process. We're not there yet as to having the whole world accepting of everyone. But I think if we can get more people meditating, and when we transcend into those deeper states of meditation, we tend to find happens is they start to live beyond the realm of their individualized egoic identity, which is me and mine, and then yours and theirs. We start to experience ours. So we go from a me paradigm to a we paradigm. And I think if we can get global leaders living in that state of consciousness, we call it unity consciousness, where global leaders are now starting to experience a collective we. And I believe that there are some global leaders thinking more along that sort of level. Then I think we're going to start having more compassionate, kind, caring global leaders. And Unfortunately, what we do need though is we need everyone to be all in on this. We can't have just 99% and one leader in the world thinking, great, everyone's all peaceful now. I can go and exploit them and take them to my advantage. We still need firmness as a peaceful, kind, caring, compassionate leader, just like as a parent that creates boundaries for a child. That's a really important part of the creation of the parent child relationship. And it's still coming from love. So we can still create boundaries, but boundaries from love, but we need to have ideally the whole world in on this idea.
So, how does meditation promote emotional intelligence and empathy in individuals?
For most people, they operate from this state, and I know this very well myself, being from in the past, quite narcissistic and hedonistic and egocentric, particularly when I was a broker. And what we tend to do is operate from our thoughts and feelings, and we're very highly motivated by our thoughts and feelings with the things that we do in life. When we start accessing these deeper states of meditation, we start accessing a state called being, and it's also called presence or awareness. In Sanskrit, we call it Sakshi Kutashta, the silent witness. And from the silent witness, we're able to then watch our thoughts and watch our emotions and start questioning whether we actually want to have those thoughts or emotions as opposed to just having thoughts and emotions. So now we've almost got this sort of duality happening inside of us, which is consciousness itself watching the ego and the identity. And then it starts to have greater capacity for regulation and take a little bit of autonomy back from the mind and from the emotions, because one thing we know is that we're not our thoughts and we're not our feelings. We have thoughts and we have feelings. And it's good to have thoughts and feelings, but we don't want to be owned and defined by them.
So, let's talk about meditation and social change. How can meditation help in addressing social injustice?
One of the things we tend to find consistently with people that integrate meditation into their lives over long periods of time is the natural inclination and arising of kindness and compassion bubbling up from within. Compassion isn't something we acquire. Compassion isn't something we can buy or get trained into us. Compassion is a state that is deep within all of us. And I think when we start peeling back the layers of our perceived identity, which is not thoughts and feelings, but the underlying essence of the soul, what we tend to find there is lovingness, kindness, care, and compassion. And what we tend to find consistently with people that have been meditating for long periods of time is that by default, one of the byproducts of their meditation practice is they become kinder and more compassionate. I wouldn't say perfect. I definitely, myself and most of the people I know that meditate aren't perfect, but definitely I notice that they have greater capacity for kindness and care. And of course, also as well as that, it doesn't mean people that don't meditate aren't having that kindness and care and compassion capabilities, because it's also at the very essence of them. It's just that some people need something like meditation to help it become more realized. Some people naturally, just by nature, without having things like meditation as a tool, because that's the inherent nature, I believe, of all beings. And I think that meditation just helps bring that to the fore a little bit more quickly.
Very well said, Mr. Tom. Beautifully articulated. So, what role does meditation play in transforming leadership and decision making?
Everyone is a leader because a leader is someone of influence. Hitler was a leader. Was he a good leader? Well, that could be debated. Donald Trump is a leader. Dalai Lama is a leader. But then someone that posts something on Instagram and changes someone's state is a leader. They've led someone into a new way of doing things or being or seeing things. And we can lead people into a negative place. We can lead people into a positive place. And we're always having a sphere of influence over things and people. Everyone and everything has a sphere of influence. If we take the sun, it has a sphere of influence to Pluto and half again with its light, its gravitational pull, its energy. The moon has a sphere of influence beyond its physical mass, which influences billions of tons of water every day in our tides. And humans have a sphere of influence, and we can really magnify this sphere of influence these days with the power of social media and podcasts and all sorts of things where we can impact and influence people all around the world. So, firstly, recognizing that everyone is a leader in their own right in some way. So, we therefore have a responsibility to have a deep appreciation, understanding about our sphere of influence and what influence and impact are we having on the world around us. And leaders, of course, when we talk about leaders in positions of authority, because we've got leaders, which everyone is, and then we've got people in positions of authority. And that's a president, a prime minister, a head of a university, a head of a school, a head of an organization, or the CEO. And so all leaders, people in positions of authority, hopefully have realized their ripple effect, their sphere of influence through the choices that they make. This is something I constantly grapple with now, which I didn't ever think about when I was being in my egotistical, narcissistic, egocentric state. But these days I'm like almost trying to assess and analyze, every thought, every decision, every post, everything that I do, everything that I say, what is the influence? Even just right now, while I'm talking to you, I don't know who's going to listen to this podcast. So it has the capacity to change someone's state. And I'm hoping that my words, in some way, shape, or form, hopefully change their state for the better.
So, Mr. Tom, what is the connection between meditation and ethical living?
And it's a great question, isn't it? Ethical living. Um,
Yes.
yeah, I think ethical living is having a deep appreciation and understanding about the ramifications of what we do and knowing the there's an underlying natural law, I think, which humans would call ethics. And I think it's really comes down to cause and effect. And cause and effect is almost a science now, where this action will lead to this reaction. And it's interesting because what one person might think is right or wrong might be different for another person. Someone, let's just say, um, in some cultures, they might think it's right to kill someone because they are opposing their religion. Okay. Let's just say someone says something negative about their religion, burnt their book or something like that, the Bible or Quran or something, and then that person feels it's in their right and it's the ethical thing to do to kill that person. So it's such a vague and broad spectrum concept, ethics, because it's so subjective to religions and politics and individuals. But I believe there's an undercurrent of natural law which comes down to cause and effect, and each action has a corresponding reaction. And I think that with meditation, what I believe it has our capacity to start to really get beyond the ideologies of the human experience, get beyond the human constructs and codes that have been conditioned into us through generations of indoctrination, and start to appreciate and understand this undercurrent of natural law that permeates and pervades all reality through all times, whether there's humans here or not. And it just allows us to start to resonate and operate from that level of intelligence that I believe is superseded the human intelligence. And it's an undercurrent of what I believe is ethics at some core. I don't believe it makes us perfect. It's very difficult for humans to be 100%, in that purest state of ethical right and wrong. It's such a complex area, but I don't know if I've answered that correctly for you, but that was my best go at it.
Very well said, Mr. Tom. As I said, beautifully articulated. So, what will be your advice for those people out there procrastinating to meditate?
When we think about time, because when we're procrastinating, what we're doing is we're delaying a choice and we're superseding one preference with another preference. And we're doing this all day long. Do I go to the gym or do I watch TV? Do I have chocolate ice cream or strawberry ice cream? Do I do my emails or do I go and write some pages in my new book that I'm writing? And so every moment there are these competing preference of time allocation and attention. And what tends to supersede one preference over another preference is the degree of which we're going to extract some value out of it. And this is something when we break this down into minutiae of the day, the minute decision makings that are going on throughout the entire day, we're always looking to extract as much value out of the choices that we make. Now, what most people will think is that I can get much quicker and more beneficial gains if I scroll through TikTok or eat ice cream than if I sit and close my eyes and withdraw my sensory delights and go into a meditation experience. Because what we're doing in our world today is we're making faster and faster gains to getting pleasure. But what we're also doing is getting more and more karmic residue from these decisions of trying to extract and commoditize pleasure out of our choices. And if you look at the world's religions and cultures and tribal cultures that willingly forego pleasure and make decisions to surrender the pleasure seeking and go into some degree of deprivation, that will be lying on a spiky mat or bed of nails, or fasting, or going into cold water therapy, or meditating for long periods of time, we tend to find there's a distinct correlation to the degrees of which those people are fulfilled and feeling joyful and healthy and happy than the cultures that have the shortest, quickest route to getting pleasure. So, bowls of ice cream, buckets of KFC, scrolling through TikTok, watching lots of TV, staying up all night gaming. We see greater and greater degrees of unhappiness and unhealthiness. And so, what we need to do as a society is recognize that we're constantly looking for the quickest route to pleasure, but what price are we paying for that? And so, with meditation, what I would suggest is where are you seeking pleasure in the quickest route and how is that working out for you? And then starting to question if life is just absolutely ridiculously amazing for you, then keep doing what you're doing. But if you're finding that you have anxiety, you're not sleeping well, or you're caught up in this emotional upheaval as you relate and respond to life circumstances, then maybe you need a little bit more stability. And maybe you need to prioritize a little bit of your time each day to withdrawing from the stimulation and from the pleasure seeking, and see if you can stabilize an internal state of being and peace and calm rather than trying to rely on some external world to be your identity and source of pleasure.
So, Mr. Tom, what would be your short-term and long-term goals as a writer?
My short-term goals are to meditate more, to enjoy the simple things of life. I'm about to go for a swim down in the ocean in a minute, um, and to still do my work and impacting as many people as possible through my teachings, my book, and my meditation and retreats. My long term goals are very similar to my short term goals. I don't really see much variance in all of that. You know, trying to work at a bigger level, I sort of feel compelled to see at some point in my trajectory of life whether I can start to influence prime ministers, presidents, kings, queens, um, some of the major CEOs of organizations around the world to at least start to bring meditation into life. I don't want to sort of put it out there that I want to make them better people, but if I can introduce meditation to their lives, then maybe by default they're going to make better decisions and we're going to have less conflict in the world, less greed and suffering.
Certainly. And good luck to your goals, and thank you for your advice. So, how can meditation reduce the burden of mental health and disorders worldwide?
You know, mental health is really, when we talk about mental health, we're talking about the absence of mental health, which is really interesting because we always talk about mental health as a negative. But mental health is something that happens after we improve the state of our mind. And for me, meditation is an exercise like going to the gym for physical health. My physical health is dependent upon me doing an activity. My physical health requires me to exercise, to do some weights, to do some stretching, to drink lots of good, healthy, clean water, to do some saunas, some ice baths. So that's a physical approach to my physical health, but I need a mental approach to my mental health. And meditation, that daily exercise of closing my eyes and repeating my mantra inside my head that my teacher gave me, which is what I deliver to my students. I give them a mantra, and that exercise of meditating improves their mental health. And I think when I went through a very severe state of poor mental health with anxiety, panic attacks, depression, agoraphobia, insomnia, I was seeing doctors, and none of them gave me mental exercises to improve my mental health. They wanted to give me medication with a C, not a T, and they wanted me to talk to someone. But neither of those two things were really improving the mental health of my mind. And I think we really need to have a daily mental health exercise, which I called meditation. One of my friends has a book called The Mind Gym, and this is what meditation is. It's a mind gym. So I think meditation is critical in improving the state of the mental health of the world.
So, Mr. Tom, what are the long term societal benefits of integrating meditation into education systems?
Thing with young people, when I've got two children myself and I've worked with quite a few school students, is that what we tend to find is school students, let's just call them the youth of the world, by choice generally don't want to meditate. They've got too many other amazing things to do with their lives in their spare time. And what we have when they go to school is that we're trying to fill their brain up with more and more information every day. And I think, and there's pure science and statistics around this, that if we can integrate meditation into our curriculum at schools, not only will the children have less stress responses, have more stability in their emotional state, have greater focus and attention on the task at hand when they've got something to do, but they will also have greater absorption capacity of the information we're trying to put in their brains because their mind expands. We always talk about mind expansion, what happens when we meditate. And what we have is children's little minds. We're trying to put lots and lots of information in, and there's so little room in there because it's so cluttered now with all the Instagram and the TikToks and Snapchat, and then all their education. And we're trying to stuff that into a vessel or a container that isn't expanding. And we're trying to put more information into something that's actually contracting because of the stress response that they're experiencing in life. So if we can bring daily meditation into the schools in the morning when they get to school and in the afternoon before they go home from school, just 10 minutes morning and evening. And there's one school that's done this in America. And this one school, and you can look this up on Wikipedia, this one school ranks number one, sorry, in the one top 1%, not number one. I think it is number one. It's in the top 1% of all schools in America in all categories: sport, debating, English, maths, geology. And that's because those students are less stressed, have bigger minds, better mind capacity, and a better sense of self without having that emotional instability that happens in those teenage years.
Totally agree. Mr. Tom, so how does meditation help in addressing addiction and substance abuse?
Well, I can speak very clearly on this one because I had a lot of addiction before I started meditating. And if we think about addiction, we're not addicted to the drugs, we're not addicted to the gambling, we're not addicted to the the scrolling on screens. What we're craving is serotonin and oxytocin. And whether it's the drinking, the drugs, the gambling, the sex, it is a vehicle for us to activate more of that dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin into our blood. For some people, it might only work if they're gambling. For some people, it might only work if they're drinking. Some people might only work if they're smoking. So, addiction is this craving for something that we can cultivate within inside ourselves. And when I started meditating, what happened was I got out of the sympathetic nervous system state, which has a depletion of serotonin and oxytocin. So, when we're in sympathetic nervous system state, that's the stress response, the body produces high levels of cortisol and adrenaline. So, anyone that's been through a very stressful experience, particularly over prolonged periods of time, they have such depleted levels of serotonin and oxytocin, and they're naturally going to crave dopamine or something to make them feel better. And so, we see people that are very stressed naturally go into addictive experiences because they're craving something to try and make them feel better because they're feeling terrible. If we can change their current state from being filled with bliss, that is serotonin and oxytocin, then by default, they're going to have less cravings, less yearnings. And this is something that I definitely noticed in my life, that as I got out of that sympathetic nervous system state, the fight flight, into the parasympathetic, and my body started to produce naturally more serotonin and oxytocin, that craving for those dopamine highs just slowly started to melt away and drop away. So I think it's a critical tool. It's not the only tool, but it's certainly a critical tool to integrate when we're working with people with addictions.
Very well said. Mr. Tom, very well said. So before we wrap up our discussion for tonight, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Mental Health 101, in its first season, people, first season. And please do listen to our latest episode. We are talking about, of course, mental health awareness. So, Mr. Tom, how can meditation be used to heal trauma in communities affected by war and violence?
Trauma so deep. And trauma is actually very physiological. This is the challenge with trauma, is that if we're just sitting and talking to a therapist, and there's nothing wrong with that, but if that's our only method for transformation, it can leave a lot of the deep wounds of that trauma left in the body. So it's very somatic. And we need to find tools and vehicles to help clear that trauma from the physiology, not from the mind. We can have a mind that totally understands and releases itself from the past experience. But if the body is still riddled with that trauma, then it's going to continue to play out. And so, meditation, along with other tools, I believe breath work, I believe energy healing, I believe possibly it's not my path, but some people might use plant medicine. There's so many different ways we have to address the clearing and releasing of trauma. But what I do notice about meditation as one of those methodologies is that by putting the physiology into deep rest that we get when we transcend in meditation, what it does is it allows an intelligence within the physiology at a cellular level to start identifying and releasing any anomalies that have accumulated in the physiology, not in the mind, but in the physiology. And it starts to do that releasing. So we find people that have been meditating with me, just even in the first weekend of doing a workshop with me, they might start crying in the meditation, or they might start feeling this sense of physiology releasing something energetically out of the body during the meditation. And that's a result of the body dropping into a deep state of restfulness, and then the body starting to heal and repair that imbalance that's happened as a result of some past experience. In Sanskrit, we call these samskaras. And these samskaras get impressed into the body through life experiences. So if you go through a traumatic experience when you're a young kid, that can get impressed into the physiology, and the meditation helps, along with other tools, the clearing of that stress that's in the body at a cellular level.
Mr. Tom Cronin, thank you so much for sharing the portal to the world. And we are looking forward for more empowering books like this. So can you please invite our listeners to support your book?
Yes, absolutely. By all means, come and find the book at Amazon or on my website, tomcronin.com, and reach out anytime on my Instagram, Tom Cronin. I'll be there as well to respond to any questions.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Tom Cronin because if you support him, more empowering books like this to come. So, Mr. Tom, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me along. It's great to share space with you today. And thanks for such great questions.
More to come, people. See you soon.